Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my friends at Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. Now, I know printing your creative projects can be mad confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. They have amazing tools, including their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free, to their 24-hour customer service support, because this stuff can be very confusing. And Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed many successful Kickstarter campaigns. And some of them, my guests, have actually used Mixum and have had great experiences with them. And so they offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And Mixum can print and basically reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to mixum.com. And right now they're running a great promotion where listeners of this show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. And I know every percentage counts right now when you're running a Kickstarter. And that is mixam.com. Again, type my name in, Andrew Davis, in the message tab, and you can get 5% off on your very first order. So without further ado, I have my guest, without further ado, I'm already tongue twisted here, is Nandor Fox. So welcome to the show.
Hey, Andrew, thanks so much, man. And, congrats again on the sponsor and Mixum. I haven't used Mixum myself, but I have backed projects and they've used Mixum, those creators, and it is really, really good quality stuff. So yeah, like Mixum's a great place. But yeah, thanks for having me, man. I'm so glad to be here. And
So
this is
we
awesome.
sort of met online for those who don't know, and then I jumped into a stream that I was the odd man out with Travis Gibb, where all you guys are content creators and I'm a podcaster. And I knew a bunch of you, and then obviously I was trying to figure out where to fit you in because you have a Kickstarter right now running called Man Child 1.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you got what, 2 days left, I want to say?
Yeah, it's I think it's down to 45 hours. So yeah, just around under 2 days.
And so before we get too far into it and talk about some of the inside baseball stuff, which is super cool about it, what is the basic premise of this comic for those who haven't heard about it and are hearing about it and then be pushing it out in the next few days?
Yeah, so Man-Child is a 6-issue limited series. It is an homage to the Marvel Age of Comics, a tribute to Stan Lee, while also being a commentary on modern-day comic book fandom and looking at the history of comics and the trajectory comics have taken over the years. It tells 2 stories simultaneously. The first following the captivating Monarch Crier, who is this monarch butterfly themed superhero in this Silver Age inspired universe, who battles Professor Pilgrim, who is a super tech genius, super villain for the series. So you're going to be reading this very traditional old school style of comic book story. At the same time, there is this modern day story being told with Rufus Boston, who is a modern day comic book fan. He's a super nerd. He loves comics, goes to the comic book shop every Wednesday, hangs out with his friends. They talk comics, they talk comic book culture. They have a good old time. And it's a celebration of fandom, a celebration of the Silver Age of comics, and also just kind of looking at where comics started and where they are now, and just kind of as a fan looking at that and observing that. And it's a fun, exciting, heartfelt, action-packed story that will put a smile on your face if you love comics.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about with this because I love comic history. I love a bunch of other stuff. Obviously, I'm very much into indie comics. I'm into different things.
Yeah.
And so I'm super curious, though, where the inspiration for this came about, because obviously it's touching upon comic history. It's paying homage to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and early people who were into comics. And obviously also superheroes are involved with it. So where did this idea come from? Even what was it like putting it together? Because it can be tricky, and you also don't want to be offensive to what's coming before. And that's super tricky because it's just a little step over the line, right?
Yeah, it really is. I gotta say, this was the most challenging thing that I've written, the most challenging thing that I've taken on, because I really didn't want to do anything. If I was going to tell a story or pay tribute to Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and these amazing revolutionaries when it comes to comic book storytelling, um, I, didn't want to fall flat on my face. It's like you got to try to do your best to uphold that. And that's something that was really important to me. So um, I did a lot of research for this book. And really the idea started after Stan Lee passed away. I really was devastated, and I found that a world without Stan Lee was a lesser world, and it just wasn't right in my eyes. And so I wanted to do something that would give back. And I wanted to also investigate his life more because after he passed, I saw the Stanley Jack Kirby debate kind of go on even more so. And that got brought up again of like who created who. And so that really made me fascinated as a fan. And so I did a lot of research into that. I read 3 or 4 biographies on Stan Lee and the history of Marvel Comics, and I watched interviews, read articles, looking at the back and forth between the creators and just where people stand on this topic. And the more I looked into it, the more I became fascinated with it and fascinated with how they were able to really get lightning in the bottle at that time. And it just kind of dawned on me that all of our favorite comics and looking at someone like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they were creating these characters when they were in their 40s. They were in their 40s, hitting into their 50s, and they had been making comics for a long time, but they created these characters at a time where they were men. They were older men, getting into just getting older. And I thought that was so fascinating that these men would create these characters for kids, and that's where the idea of like man child came, and that contrast and juxtaposition of like how do you be a grown up and put yourself in that childlike frame of mind, and enjoy the things of your childhood, because comics have matured with its audience over the years, and we look back and we uphold these classic characters. We look at these classic characters and we adore them. We love them. We wear them on our sneakers. We wear T-shirts of them. They're a part of our culture. And the more I looked at that and just how all of that blossomed over the generations and over the years, that's what led to the modern day story with Rufus. So I didn't want to just do a throwback story. I didn't want to just do something that made people feel nostalgic. I wanted to do something that made people feel nostalgic, but also that you have that push and pull between the classic and the modern day and fantasy and reality, because that's what we do as fans. We have that push and pull. I mean, you're absorbed in all these stories. Once the movie ends or the comic book ends, you're right back to reality. And I felt that was a really interesting concept to dive into. So yeah, it really started with the passing of Stan Lee, and that's where the story starts too for this character. So it's very sincere, authentic, me putting myself out there to look at comics and the beauty of the superhero. So yeah, it's a lot of things, but that's really where it came from.
And obviously, to even go into this and talk about how they could, it's obviously we're going to talk
Yeah.
somewhat about lightning in a bottle in a little bit. So I think it's a very interesting discussion about where comics have gone and all that
Hmm.
stuff. Because I get to talk to people about that, and your book explores some of that. But even to dive into the story, I mean, we got 2 separate stories going on. Where obviously
Yeah.
we got Rufus, who and I'm going to be as politically correct as I can be.
Oh
He
yeah.
sort of the stereotypical older gentleman who's in his 30s. Obviously, he's in
Hmm.
his parents' basement. He has a job, but he probably has a few friends. He probably
Hmm.
doesn't have a girlfriend at this point. And I'm,
Right.
and I'm trying to be as polite. He's a little bit overweight a little bit, but he's your typical sort of stereotypical nerd. but he knows
Yeah,
everything about
yeah.
nerd culture. And it's very interesting because that stereotype has been slightly broken, but you go to a con, there's a lot of people looking like that. And,
Well,
and,
exactly. Yeah,
and
exactly. And that's
I say this to
something,
be nice,
yeah.
and I think that we can be nice when we say this, but what was that like even developing him to be that?
Mhm.
Because it is sort of spot on.
Yeah, it is like with all my stories, I really come from an honest perspective and try to look at things that I've seen and that I've experienced in my own life. So everything you're getting from me are things that I've seen other people go through, other people I've seen, things I've gone through. And Rufus is, like you said, that guy that I would see at conventions, and he's the guy that's at the comic book store more than I am.
He's
And
your
I'm just
Wednesday
like,
guy that you see
yeah,
picking up.
yeah,
And I say this
exactly.
very nicely, and I'm not trying to be
Yeah,
offensive, and I know it comes off that way to some degree because it's not politically correct what I just said by any
right,
stretch of the
right.
imagination. But I know the Wednesday guy who goes into the comic shop and on his lunch break and he sits down and he starts thumbing through his comics instead of eating lunch on a Wednesday. And I
Yeah.
see and like you've seen it, and I've seen people at comics, and like, you start talking to them, and they're the most intelligent people, and they're the nicest people in the world.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. And he also is an embodiment of a lot of my own feelings on myself and growing up and being a fan and how people may have seen me or have people that did see me and judge me for loving comics. This character really is a lot of me, but a lot of other people I've seen, and he's a mixture of all that. So,
So,
if
I hate to
anything,
interrupt because there's going to put context in, but how old are you? Because I'm 28, so I'm in.
right?
I don't know how old you are.
I'm 24.
So
Yeah.
this is you're sort of in the same generation as me, where
Hmm.
I grew up in high school, and it was okay to wear a Batman shirt. It was okay to wear a Captain America shirt, but you're
Hmm.
wearing an anime shirt, and people are looking at you very differently. And I would
Yeah. Yeah.
like certain clothes, and I didn't conform to the Aeropostale and the Hollister and
Hmm.
the Abercrombie and Finch crowd and
Yeah.
Simon Beans crowd, or the Affliction crowd. I was
Hmm.
wearing all of these obscure T-shirts. I wore a Huntress shirt, and no one knows who Huntress is, and so it's very much that when you bring it up,
Yeah.
and that's why I wanted to bring that up, but because
Yeah. Totally. I mean, it is. I am a part of that generation, and I was also thinking about Stan Lee at his time, and that was a big inspiration for what Rufus goes through and the kind of judgment and the things that he does and how he's seen. Because at the time, Stan Lee in the '60s, when he was creating these characters, I mean, comics themselves were not seen as literature, and they were not seen as anything. I mean, they were seen as bad, for a very long time. That's why we had the Comics Code Authority, and they were bad for kids. You shouldn't have kids. The Seduction of the Innocent, that book that professor, that guy made. I forget his name, but um, it was. I thought that was really fascinating because Stan Lee was pushing the envelope of comics, and they were making comics palatable for children, but also for adults. And that's why they're mainstays right now, because they resonated with adults and kids. And that really, I thought, was just really interesting because they could have just, you know, sat back and been like, okay, we're not going to do anything. Like, we're just going to make these for kids. We're going to follow all the rules here and not do anything risky. And these are just going to stay for kids. But no, Stan Lee wanted to do something different, and he wanted to push that. And readers really responded to that. And so that's a big reason why Rufus is the way he is, because um, it's that concept of being a man, being a grown man, and still enjoying that side of you, or that past that you have, and holding on to the beauty of the things you've grown up with. And a lot of people that I've seen stopped liking comics, after they met their girlfriend or they went to college. They grew up. They grew up, or whatever you want to say, like however you want to put it. And it's like, now wait a second, like, is that really growing up, or are you just kind of bending the knee to how society sees you? Because um comics have gotten more respect over the years, and that's something else that I find interesting for culture. And you're seeing that with anime right now, how now it's like, oh, it's cool to like anime, like it's so cool, like
It's
everyone.
so crazy what's going on because your book sort
Yeah.
of goes into this a little bit too, where obviously, Rufus feels when his lead, I don't know if he's a comic artist or writer. I don't think it's Stu Leeds, I want to
Mm-mm.
say, or
No, yeah, he's just a fan who daydreams a lot. Yeah.
no, 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 the comic writer who dies.
Oh yeah, Stu Leeds. Yeah, so he's inspired from Stan Lee.
So,
Yeah.
the reason why I bring this up is that it's also this embodiment that this guy is an icon at this point. It's
Hmm.
what it's perceived to be, and so that's something that's also very interesting because when we talk about the culture now, it is very very interesting where it's grown, where it's cool to say, "Oh, I was
Yeah.
just at a
Yeah.
con, and now I have a picture of Stan Lee," and everybody's like summing up, and like I have I Stanley, I have an Obama variant signed by Stanley, the first print run, and it's signed by
Oh, that's
Mark Wade.
awesome.
I'm getting everybody on it, and I may or may not have a plan to get Obama on it, which would be awesome. But
Yeah.
when I put it up there, everybody responded very positive to it, and
Hmm.
because now it's cool, and that was maybe 3 4 years ago, and
Yeah.
so it's very interesting because I don't know where Rufus is exactly in this, but he's sort of, I think, not where it's full acceptance like our world, but it's a little
Mhm.
bit more accepted than not in his world. And it's just super interesting to explore this idea and how he even reacts to the
Yeah.
fact that this guy died. And it's shocking, like as if his parent died.
Hmm.
It's because in a lot of ways, and I went through some crazy stuff. I went through a rough surgery, and Blackest Night in Fear itself. If that
Hmm.
wasn't around, I wouldn't have made it because comics ain't
Yeah.
getting out, and it's very much that's what I took out of Rufus when he hears that Stu died, and he's at
Hmm.
his job, and it's sort of like an emergency phone call happening.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very very topical, I think, because especially in today's time too, because I guarantee you that in 2 3 years we're going to be talking about in the middle of COVID when my mom had COVID or I lost
Hmm.
a loved one because of COVID. I was reading this book and it definitely helped to put things in perspective. There's going to be a bunch of
Yeah.
conversations that come out, and I think it's super interesting what you touched upon because it's almost like a lifeline outside to cope.
Hey, that's one of my books, Lifeline. That's cool. That's cool. I like that. No, but it really is like going, yeah, what you're saying there. I mean, um, this is a book that I want people to read, not just the first issue, but as we progress through the series, that you will see some of yourself in it, but also maybe see other people in it that and it'll also breed conversations about, you know, maybe where you are in life, or, like maybe you're one of those people that doesn't want to display how much you love comics, and maybe that's kind of scary for you wherever you're at. And I really hope this book helps those people and makes them go, you're not alone. And like, you should embrace what you love because that's what makes you you as a person. And that's something that stories have done for me over the years. And I've had those conversations with people that are like, I don't want to wear a superhero shirt because I'm worried that people are going to look at me funny. Or I remember when I was talking with my girlfriend and I told her one time, um, you know, I'm I was in I was afraid that you would be embarrassed by like how much I love, comics, or how much I love these things that I do. And she came right back at me and she was like, I was afraid you were gonna think I was weird because I liked anime. And it was like it was that moment where it was like, man, why should we be afraid of loving what we do, or loving these things that we have joy in and that we share with other people. And I just thought that that is something that no one should have to feel, and that's what I wanted to bring with this book.
Well, I have a certain person that I know who is exactly like that, and
Yeah.
I know exactly what that is. He hasn't listened to Queens under pressure. Is a very
Oh,
good
oh
good.
man.
No, he's heard the song, but he doesn't understand what it means because it's like a good
Oh,
friend.
I yeah.
It's a perfect analogy. But
Yeah.
I know people who are exactly like that, and it's so interesting to touch upon this, and then even going further into the book, because and this is where it gets fun and complicated, is that we have a second story going on in this
Yeah.
book that sort of crosses in and out, and I'm not too sure, and maybe you maybe we'll leave it ambiguous for a reason. But the second story is that we have monarchy.
Crier. Yeah. It's
Fryer,
Mark
wow,
Crier.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
off. And he is definitely in a older time. I think it's safe to say more of a Silver Age comic time.
Hmm.
He wants to
Yeah.
protect New York City, and he's obviously dealing with Professor Pilgrim, who is a evil genius who sort of always escapes. I'm presuming, and the feud is always continuing, where Pilgrim is never really thrown into jail in the traditional
Hmm.
comic realm, or he's thrown into jail, he escapes. I think that's a pretty safe assumption, and it's very much an old, comic book feel, Silver Age. The art is
Yeah.
very much Silver Age, and so what was this like creating this story? Because I don't think this story is as layered as the first one, but it's
Hmm.
very much, kind of just a sort of classic Avengers from like the 70s, 80s type of feel. So what was that like
Yeah.
creating this? And then we're gonna dive a little bit deeper in a second. We're gonna go
Yeah.
Inception.
Yeah. I wanted to do something that does give you that nostalgia factor, and also by paying tribute to Stanley, I wanted to write a comic that when you read it, it makes you think of Stan. It makes you think of the way that he would write stories with Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, and it gives you that just sense of hype and excitement, and this makes you, it just, the words really pop off the page because it's like behold and all of those really exciting adjectives and ways of telling the story that makes reading comics from the Silver Age really exciting.
It's
And
definitely
so
Marvel Silver Age. It's not DC.
yeah, yeah,
Because
totally.
DC, and I'm a big DC guy. So
Hmm.
clearly this is more Marvel writing style, and it's
Yeah,
definitely the color scheme and even the way it's blocked out and the line work, and even just how the story progresses. It's way more Marvel Age, Silver Age, and it's
yeah.
definitely Steve Ditko, and you know you could argue a little bit of Larry Hama in there, and then people like
Hmm.
that. And Howard Chaykin, I think, is another good example, sort of in that realm,
Yeah,
in that position, and Stan Lee, and obviously those guys. And so that's something that's super interesting, and even just to come up with this story, because it's basic, but when we go a little bit deeper, I'm purposely avoiding going deeper for a reason,
yeah,
for a
yeah.
second, because it's going to make sense. It's just very cool to even just play in that sector, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, it is because it's actually what's really interesting for me as a writer is writing those sections are really difficult because it's not how I would write them. It's because I'm trying to write it like a timepiece or time capsule of that era. So when I'm approaching it, there's a lot more captions, there's a lot more um maybe
I was
unnatural
going to
ways.
ask about that because
Yeah, yeah.
so Golden Age and Silver Age are very similar in how they're written. Bronze
Hmm.
is different than in both Silver and Golden. Um,
Right.
Bronze to modern isn't a big jump. Going from
Hmm.
Golden and Silver to modern is a huge jump, and
Yeah.
obviously, I think that. And correct me if I'm wrong, and people can disagree with me. In fact, everybody watching this, if you made it this far, please disagree. Please let me know what you think. Um, I find that modern comics read faster, they're written
Hmm.
faster, they're
Yeah.
less wordy. And I find that Golden Age and Silver Age and even Bronze Age have a lot more words in them. And
Yeah.
that I've read comics that had almost no action bubble and were all captions. And
Yeah.
it's a broken writing process, Golden and Silver
Hmm.
Age. I mean, particularly, I don't want to read a Golden Age book. And it's not
Yeah.
that the characters of Spider-Man in the Golden Age or Silver Age aren't bad. It's the idea that it's too wordy and it's too blocky for me.
Yeah.
And it's also, I would imagine, a broken writing process to some degree. So, what is that like for you to step into that? Because it's, I would imagine, it's backwards to write it sort of that way.
Yeah, it is because I really it's weird. It's like I have my own Marvel method just between myself. So I have these conversations with myself of laying out the pages and the art like they would do, like Jack Kirby would do. He would draw the book and Stan Lee would write over it. And so that's kind of what I do with myself, where I lay out those pages and I lay out the panels, and then I write over what the art is. And so I write over it with more captions and with thought bubbles and dialogue. And it definitely has, those pages definitely have more of a claustrophobic feel, which is what you want, because I am trying to do it in that way. So people are going to read it and they're going to be like, "Whoa, this is a lot different than reading Rufus's story." And that's because Rufus's story is like a modern day comic. It's written in that way. It's like, you don't it's even maybe even a little more modern than modern, because you don't get in his head like modern comics do. Even, it's everything's happening, everything's reactionary in this modern day world. But in the comic book world, you can get in the head of these characters. You can see and feel and hear, everything that they're thinking and saying, and all that stuff. So there's a lot more thought that goes into the actual like writing of it, and a lot more vocabulary that I use than I do in the modern day story, because of course it would be different. And that's what I want people to notice. And I want them to be like, man, this really does feel like a Silver Age book. And then you flip the page and you're with Rufus and you're like, whoa, what happened? Like this is not what I was reading. And so that made the process really fun as a writer, because I got to write differently. It's like I got to tap into a part of my writing that I haven't before. And it's very satisfying because it's really stretching me as a writer and as a creator.
And then obviously we're going to talk about the twist here, because the twist is that we don't know exactly if, and this could be read in a multiple ways, and we might leave it ambiguous here, but obviously Rufus is sort of entering a stage where he's coping with this, and we don't know if he's daydreaming all of this. We don't know if
Mhm.
he's thinking about it and writing it. I don't know. Have you seen Californication by any chance?
No, I haven't. But I've
So,
heard
so,
of it.
so I might ruin part of it, but I think it's going to get to the point where everything
Yeah.
that's going on in Hank's world, there's a discussion and there's an open thing about it where it's almost as if he's writing it and he's retelling it, because he's always typing at a typewriter in certain scenes,
Mm,
in particular either when there's some writing stuff going on, he uses a typewriter. And
yeah.
the argument is that it's his entire story, almost that he's retelling and he's typing it, but instead of showing him typing it, you're living all of it, and everything is a character in his
Oh.
world, including himself. And obviously, it's very Bukowski oriented, and so it could very
Hmm.
well be that this book is Rufus is writing the comic that he's telling, and his reaction is one way how to interpret it. He could be
Yeah.
daydreaming it. It could just be two separate stories completely. It could be a book that he's reading, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and we don't know
Yeah.
exactly what this is in the first issue because it's not clear. All we know is that obviously a lot of Rufus is in these characters, and it's exemplifying, and it's his, response, I guess, emotionally to the loss of what he feels is his idol. And so it's very interesting because we can go down
Mhm.
a very interesting path. And I don't know if we're going
Yeah.
to get an answer to those questions or if it's going to be remaining ambiguous to leave it that way. But the reason why I bring up Californication is I love Californication. I love, you know, dirty realism, which is
Yeah.
what Californication is. I love Bukowski. If I'm to ever write something, and I may or may not be doing that, it's going to be dirty realism, and I
Mm.
love that area. And I
Cool.
think it's a very, very cool thing what they've done with Californication. I don't know if that's what we're doing here with this to some degree, or we're just going through the creation process, because I would imagine that this could also be that, where it's just even just maybe he's not even creating a comic per se, but this is how he's creating and the world that he's been exposed to. And by going through this thing and envisioning it, he's going through some type of creation process to deal with his
Mhm.
emotions and all sorts of stuff. And I just threw out a bunch of stuff there, but I've obviously
Yeah,
put thought
no,
into
that's
your
good,
process.
man. That's good. And I want people to ask those questions. That is something that is a big mystery for the story. And it's one of those things where, it's at the heart of what the story is. So it's weird not talking about it, because it's a big part of what this story is about. But it is something that I want the reader to discover, because I want them to have those questions, and I want
We don't have
them.
to push too hard, but it's just the idea
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you don't have to answer it. I'm letting you know right now, you don't have to answer it. Just the idea that
Yeah.
I think it's very much where there's a lot of directions this can go into. And
Mhm.
we're also dealing with the fact that, well, I'm 28 and I read a lot of comics. I write about comics. I have a website about comics, and I haven't written
Yeah.
anything in a while, but I'm in the process of reviewing a book, and I give my opinion and how I feel about it, and why it's important
Yeah.
to deconstruct comics. And I've done this for a while, and it is important to understand this. And maybe that's also where at a certain point you're a fan, and then
Mhm.
sometimes you cross over into something else.
Yeah.
And the question that's now becoming is that, like, I'm not a fan anymore of comics. I'm a fan of comics, but I'm also something else. I don't know exactly what I am. and
Mhm.
and and I mean, I'm a human. I should make that crystal clear first and foremost. I'm
Yeah.
still human. I want to get that off the table here. But you're a fan, and you're obviously crossed into something else as well. And you're a
Yeah.
writer, and you're producing comics. I'm a podcaster. I run a website. I sell on eBay. It becomes very interesting because I started out as a fan and I was a reader, and then fast forward 5 years in, I've now, when you start selling books on eBay, you become
Mhm.
something else. And then when
Yeah.
you start doing podcasting and interviewing creators, you become something else. And well, Rufus might be at that crossroads as well. And it's fascinating because if you're in your mid 30s and you're a comic fan, at some point you crossed over.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. I mean, um, that's again something I've seen with other creators, and every creator starts out as a fan, and every um most of the time anyways. And it's something that
Probably about
makes comics.
95%. Because
Yeah.
every once in a while, some of these people come in from the writing world and then they get hired to
Mhm.
do a comic. And then they didn't come in as a comic book fan, they came in as a writer to do a
Yeah.
comic. Like, I think Neil Gaiman's a good example of that, where I don't think Neil
Right.
Gaiman was a comic book fan, but then he created a bunch of comics. And
Yeah.
I think I could be wrong on that, or Michael Chabon might have created a bunch of stuff, and he's
Right.
done some comic work. And then there's other people who've done comic work who are writers, but for the most part, I agree. But continue.
Yeah, like I was just kind of going down that rabbit hole of when you are a fan and you um grow up with these characters, like a lot of people have. And people 10, 20, 30, 40 years older than me have. It becomes a big part of their life. And I mean, that's the joy of being a fan, is talking about what could have happened, or oh, I have this story, and I have this idea, and of like how these what should happen with these characters. And that's the beauty of talking with other people about characters, and being a comic book fan in general, and fan of anything, is like all of that imagination and what things could be like. So that's something that I really wanted to tap into with this story, and make people think about that and feel that, and hopefully make them rediscover what they loved about superheroes and what they loved about comics in the first place, and that first foray into what these superheroes are, and how they all started. And I think that's just a lot of that's a lot of fun that only fans can appreciate, and newcomers that would read the book, I think they would appreciate the humor of it and the fitness of it, and how much energy there is in it. But people that are fans and have been fans for years of heroes, of superheroes, will be able to look at Rufus and his friends, and what's going on, and be like, man, like this is on point. This makes me think of other people I know, or people that I've known throughout my life. And it creates a real sense of conversation between the story and the reader. And that's a really important aspect to it.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be very interesting because obviously this book is sort of forcing a conversation, whether you have it with another person or just internally, or you even just raise questions
Yeah.
on some of the
Yeah.
stuff. Where some people might say, "Hey, I just want to read it, and I'm not too sure I want to talk to anybody about this," but there are going to be questions that are going to have to be forced to be asked. And
Hmm.
obviously, when you read it, I think that that's where this is sort of going. And look, not every question that this book poses to people is going to you have to answer as an individual, but at
Right. Right.
some of them, I think are going to be sort of forced, or even just pondering, the position. So I don't want to push too hard anymore in this. I don't want to push where this is going because I think we're getting to it and we're sort of circling where issue
Yeah.
one goes and issue two and so on and so forth. But obviously we're dealing with a lot of questions in comics. But I do want to touch upon something else before we get to rewards, because obviously since we're talking about Golden Age comics, and it
Yeah.
might get slightly controversial, but in a lot of ways, when Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and even with DC, I know this book doesn't deal with the Marvel side, the DC side of things, it deals with more Marvel, Steve Ditko,
Hmm.
Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, um, they really hit and captured lightning in a bottle with building out and establishing these characters. Obviously, these characters have grown throughout the
Hmm.
years, and Stan Lee, didn't fully develop Spider-Man to where he is right now. Same thing with
Hmm.
Captain America, and a variety of other people, but they started that, and they really started the world, and they hit the world really well, and they built the world nicely. And
Yeah.
so, and I feel in today's world that a lot of comics aren't recapturing that lightning. I feel that Marvel and DC and even Image to some degree, and I get bored with comics. I mean, I can't think of if I'm actually reading an emotional comic right now that's invoked emotion, but I
Hmm.
find that I read a lot of comics and they don't invoke emotion in me. While I'm
Yeah.
watching an anime show, I just watched I watched Gundam, and it's a
Mm.
war, and you feel it, and you feel the sacrifice.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I understand that sometimes it's a little bit harder to do in a comic or a book, but I don't. I feel like even the emotion of triumph hasn't been achieved in comics
Yeah.
lately. So, and that's sort of the lightning in a bottle. So where do you feel about that? Because I think it's a big problem right now in comics, because those guys and what
Yeah.
we're paying tribute to really captured it well.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what makes the indie scene so interesting. And I think that's something that mainstream comics. Oh, hey, Larry, what's up, man?
Long time no speak.
Everyone go back Niobe because it looks awesome. um, but
I'm back
yeah,
at
I
250, everybody. You can't take my title away.
that's right.
It's
um,
live too, which is even funnier.
I I think with comics as the what made what Stan Lee, Kirby, and Ditko did is that was at a time where Joan told Stan, like, why don't you write these characters? So that was his wife. Why don't you write these characters how you want to write them? Because he was going to quit. He was going to quit writing comics. He was going to quit doing comics. And she was like, well, since you're going to quit anyways, like if they fire you for writing them the way you want to write them, like you might as well just, get it out of your system. And so that's what he did. And that's what he did with Jack Kirby with the Fantastic Four. And look what happened, and then they created Spider-Man and the Hulk and the Avengers and all these characters. And it was like he was in the position to do whatever he wanted. And I think that creative freedom, and that's what makes the kinship between the start of Marvel Comics with indie creators, because as indies, you can create whatever you want to, and there's no one to really hold you back or go, well, we can't do that because it messes with continuity. At the time there was no continuity. They were just creating characters, and they were just making things, and they were seeing what would stick and what would happen. But now it's like we have the process of, checking all the boxes when it comes to continuity and making sure this character stays this way and this character stay this way. It's like at that time they were all malleable and you could kind of do whatever you wanted to. But now that we have all this history with them, I think it's different. It's different in the way we approach these characters because we're not there at that time. And I think that is a big reason why, we haven't had a whole lot of new characters, and a whole lot of new, innovations with comics. I think what happened with Image Comics is one of the very few and rare things that, was that time where these creators had their own characters and they were making them, and it was, an explosion of creativity. But at the same time, it didn't last.
Do you also think that it's also becoming because, when I was actually just listening to Gary Vee, and I promise it's going to make sense in a second, but he was saying, I spend 10% of my time on social media and I spend the other 90% of my time on 14-hour days running a $500 million company. And dealing with corporate structuring. Because for those who don't know who Gary Vee is, he runs a wine business.
Oh, he's great. Yeah.
I don't know if you know his full companies that he runs. He runs a massive media, social media marketing agency that caters to big Fortune 500 companies that pay literally millions of dollars. And it's a top agency that has 9 sub agencies beneath it. And so what he says is that I'm dealing with a lot of corporate structures. He has admins. He has a chief of staff, because when you're dealing with that, he's not dealing with every little decision per se, but he's in the big picture position. And when you're dealing with, 9 social media sub agencies and media agencies and media groups, it becomes very, very interesting, where there's a lot of corporate structure that you have to deal with. And I'm watching a documentary on why Google has $135 billion. And I hate to say this, but Disney has a lot of money too. Okay. And Disney owns Marvel. And, the things that when you're dealing with corporate structure, it's very complicated. I don't have any corporate structure in my business. At some point, I'm going to form an LLC, and I'm going to have possibly 3 or 4 companies underneath that are encompassed in it. But again, the corporate structure is just me, and maybe I will have, a person who's an admin, who's essentially a higher chief of staff and is a scheduler, for lack of a better word. So obviously there's going to be very little corporate structure. And so do you think that's also part of the problem now with comics versus indie?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's really, really interesting because when I was looking back, hey Sam, what's up? I'm doing good. What's up with you? Like, when I was looking back at how these characters were made at that point in time, just things have changed so much. The way we think about superheroes and the fact that they are so accepted now, and everyone knows Captain America, everyone knows Iron Man and Spider-Man. It's like the creators in these characters aren't the underdogs anymore. I mean, it's like they aren't the people that no one's looking at, but it's like now everyone's looking at. Yeah, it's a party now. I don't know if he means like fandom or right now with all of us here, but it is a party.
But
yeah,
like I agree that it's this idea also that I think that there's too much money involved at this point as well. That really takes this core emotional story, which is what you're doing in a lot of ways, and that's what's going on. And so I think that really affects lightning in a bottle in a lot of ways
Yeah.
because you can't act the same way when you have corporate guidance in there and then you have
Hmm.
a lot of money and that, Disney is I would say if you were to buy Disney, they're a $200 billion company easy,
Yeah.
possibly more. And, it's the idea when you're dealing with a company that is huge, you know, you can't just kill Captain America if you don't have complete creative
Yeah. Right.
freedom of killing
Right.
Captain America off unless you're doing what DC does with Black Label. And in Black
Yeah.
Label, you do whatever you want, but it's not continuity at that point. But you have to
Hmm.
break continuity off. And
Yeah.
I think it's a real problem. I think that's something that really India is doing very well. And I was just curious
Yeah.
your take on that because if I'm to do an indie book on gaming, for instance, I could do whatever I want with that. I
Yeah.
could up to a point, but then you get corporate structure. Obviously Larry was on, and Niobe. Obviously he's having a soft reboot, but if he was to continue and he does a soft reboot and then he does like 15 issues, he can't just in issue 16 change the rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, there's still a lot of creative control, and so it's super interesting. So obviously, I was just curious your thoughts on that because it's so
Yeah.
relevant to your book.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great question. And it's something that I've wondered too, and you think about why haven't they created like new characters, like why are they so hesitant to create more and more new characters? It's like they're just usually spin-offs of that main character. And that
So
goes
the
to
last,
trademarks,
this
and
is
all that
crazy.
stuff.
The last new character that I know Marvel invented was a drag queen X-Men.
Oh yeah.
That's the last new character I know that Marvel has created. That is
Yeah.
bad. And the only reason why I
Yeah.
know that it was
Yeah.
created by Senna Grace, who is a Muslim comic
Mm,
writer. So you want to talk gay Muslim comic writer, and not to get too political, but you want to talk about a crazy circumstance and in the
yeah.
most unlikely thing on the planet. You're looking at it, and the only reason why that thing got approved is because Iceman, when Senna turned Iceman gay, that book on the surface and issues failed in the trade paperbacks. That book exploded.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's like one of the only times that I know that corporate governance in Marvel legitly imploded on itself, which is insane.
Hmm.
That's the last, and then out of that was a drag queen mutant X-Men. That's the
Yeah.
only character I know from Marvel that was created, and I don't no idea
Yeah.
how I know it. Beyond that, I'm just a Santa Grace fan, and and and
Yeah.
it's a bizarre thing. And even then, I mean, Marvel rolled that thing out correctly too, which is ludicrous. But that was maybe like 6, 7 years ago, which is bad.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, totally. And I know there's a lot of hesitation because, of course, these creators, and that's something, we've seen is they don't want to create new characters because the company owns them. They don't own them, and I think that's a big part of it too. And I mean, Stan Lee had to fight for that. He had to fight for money for the characters that he made. I know for the first Spider-Man film, he had to sue Marvel to get money from the first Spider-Man film because they didn't pay him. And it's like he helped create Spider-Man, as a part of that corporate machine that, can leave you. And I think, they themselves felt that. And I think a lot of creators are wary of that. And that's why creating, being an independent creator, not tied to all of that really helps you to, do what you want to do and not have all these people telling you, well, we would prefer that you did this, and
It's
that,
also it's also. I mean, you see my little cute elf up there. I own that. I
yeah.
own that. If you take it, I will sue you. I will politely write you a cease and desist.
Yeah.
I will send you a non-lawyer letter first and foremost, saying just
Yeah.
take it down. I don't want to litigate with you. Now, if you persist and say I'm putting on a T-shirt because I have a T-shirt of it,
Mhm.
I will then write you a cease and desist, and then I will attach my lawyer bill to you and expect you to pay it. That's two. If you don't do that, I will see you in court.
Mm.
And my point is that it will get ugly. So if a convention took my logo and started messing with it and put it on a badge, I would be calling up that con very
Yeah.
quickly with a lawyer
Yeah.
because I have to protect my IP. That hasn't appeared in any comic yet. It hasn't appeared on any cover yet. It may or may not at some point, but that is my logo. That is my intellectual property. I paid for it, and it
Hmm.
needs to be taken care of and protected even further. But it's the idea that that's on my website, it's on my Facebook page. She's used in everything that I touch for the most part.
Yeah.
She's getting a little sister soon. The point is that I understand that IP, and I think that that's another thing that I think is also changed where IP matters. Because
Hmm.
what is Spider-Man worth? At least $1 billion, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. He's got to be.
And so I think at this point also that's the other thing too is that creators. I mean, I don't know what talons are worth by Scott Snyder and Greg and a few other people have invented some of them as well. But I don't know like Court of the Owls, the talons, but I don't know what those things are worth. But I don't think they're worth as much as Batman. But I think you could make the argument the character Talon, you know,
Yeah.
is worth at least 300,000. I would put a fair estimate on because what you can do with that, there's a lot of stuff DC could do with it. Whether they table for 10 years or they pick up it and do a 6 minute issue miniseries, and I think that that's
Yeah.
very big. Also, is that owning your rights and owning your characters. Because as I stated, my elf, I'm very protective of that. If somebody said, "Hey, I want to draw fan art of your elf," and it was you, and said, "Hey, I want to draw fan art," or if there was an artist, that's a little bit different because I'm granting it, but it was asked
Hmm.
first. It wasn't
Yeah.
done and then asked.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I've had that with the Monarch Crier, the superhero. I've had people reach out to me and want to do fan art of him, and I really appreciate that they asked, and I granted it, and I love it. I love seeing it. So, yeah, there's totally, um, there is a good faith and a polite, understanding that you should have with people and they should ask you, can I do this? And that's the right thing to do.
And it gets a little tricky with conventions and blank
Yeah,
cover
yeah.
sketches and the rule I understand is that I'm working on a complete blank cover Zenoscope set of a
Mm,
particular book by a artist named Elias Chazus. Obviously, people know who Chazus is, and he works for Zenoscope. He does a lot of work for Zenoscope. I don't think Zenoscope minds a commission per
mhm.
se because it benefits them, especially if it fits the cover and it
Yeah.
fits Chazus' style. And I also think some companies understand this. And I was speaking with this about Rob Anderson. And this
Mhm,
this book may or may not be a cover, and I have to pitch it to Zenoscope, and Zenoscope really actually liked the cover. And they were like tweeting it out at a con
mm.
when it was getting done. So they were very very happy with what he did with it because it helped their brand, didn't hurt their brand. But
Yeah,
it's the idea that I think some companies understand how to use fan art, and I think some companies don't understand how to use it. And then it goes
yeah,
into a whole nother topic of fan fiction. And
yeah,
obviously,
right.
there's been discussions about fan fiction. I've had discussions with people who have worked in the higher echelons of DC, and they don't want to acknowledge it because then it exists, then it's use of character, and it becomes a
Yeah,
bigger issue. And it's very, very complicated when you have, writing your own Harry Potter fan fiction, and Ron and Harry might be doing something that's not wonderful.
mhm.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey, hey, guys! I know what everybody's thinking. We weren't going dirty. I was just saying they were sending curse system out for. Just saying.
Yeah.
I know where everybody's
Yeah.
mind was going, and I want to stand corrected here. We're about revenge on this show and not the other thing. But anyhow, like where how do you feel about that? Because I'm curious. Because obviously I'm speaking to a creator, and I know we're getting controversial. I'm ruining your career before it starts.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. It's a I've always found that to be a really tricky subject because, if someone really enjoys something and they're spreading it, for people to enjoy it too, it's like as a company, it's like, do you want to stop that? Because I mean, they can become fans of that thing and that they can, you know, um, go back to the source and then start paying you, start paying the company for that thing. Someone does a fan art of Spider-Man, maybe they love that artist, and then they're like, man, that's such a cool piece of art. Let me read more about Spider-Man. Oh no, don't cancel me. Good one, good one. Yeah,
So,
like
so, so,
it's
so, so to even talk about this, because obviously,
yeah.
if somebody's going and spending $250 on a commission or 300 or 400 on a commission, and I want Batman on it, at that point, I mean, I'm feeding an artist to some degree.
Hmm.
I'm happy. They're getting fed. I want what I want. I'm getting it created because I want to look at the art and I want something original. But
Yeah.
it's also the idea that now if that thing gets like 9,000 likes on Instagram, isn't that good for everybody involved? Because
Yeah, yeah.
now a bunch of people are like, oh man, this is a really cool interpretation of it. I mean, this post on Instagram got like 7,500 likes within a week, and
Yeah.
it's Zenescope, and Zenescope was thrilled with it. Um, and it was this idea that it was a Van Helsing cover, and it's great, but Zenescope was cool with it because it only benefited them because all these people, where 7,500 people are not Zenescope fans of Elias Childers on Instagram, or I shouldn't say that there probably are 7,500 fans. It's the idea though that a bunch of people who are not Zenescope fans saw it is where I'm going with this,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh man,
Yeah.
Van Helsing, man, I want to check out what this book is. And let's say you captured half a percentage of those people who are not Zenescope fans, and then a quarter of that half a percentage, so 2.0 like 0.25 became fans of it. I mean, that's how I view it, and it goes even further. Where what if somebody just draws a little bat stinger on your book? Is that
Yeah.
like gonna Dave Finch
Yeah.
drew a little
Yeah.
bat stinger on a Batman book of mine? Legitimately, a little bat symbol, like so. It gets tricky, and
Hmm.
I know Rob Anderson. I don't mean to put him on blast. He made a really good video on this, and 2 or 3 parts, but it's a really, really interesting discussion. And I think it's such a hot topic right now, and I'm just curious what you thought of it because we're talking about golden age, and I don't think these silver age guys and these golden age guys ever thought this would be the issue, and ever thought that this would be a problem of
Yeah. No, it's
doing
like a
so.
blessing and a curse. Yeah, because I mean, they just wanted people to, buy their stories, buy their books. They had no idea that they were going to blow up, and become this crazy and important and a part of, mainstays of pop culture. So,
And very
they
much
had no,
collectible.
yeah, yeah, they had no idea. And I think it's one of those emerging markets and emerging things that you're like, wait, how do I, you can only figure it out after it's already happened. It's only more clear in hindsight of like, now wait a second, what's actually going on here? So it's a good problem to have, but it still can be a problem. And I think it's really important for, creators to be mindful of that and to not, turn a blind eye. But to be aware that, you know, if people like your stuff, that's probably a really good thing, and they're going to share it out. But if they start, you know, crossing the line, or you start to notice some fishy things, I think it's good to look into that and see what's up with that.
Because I mean, your book doesn't deal with this per se, but obviously this is somewhat part of it to some degree, to the point where when we're exploring and really commenting on the entire comic world and where we are in the modern world, how golden
Yeah.
and silver age stuff, I mean, all this stuff starts sort of happening. And I know your book doesn't particularly deal with what we just outlined, but
Hmm.
it is obviously in the fray. And I think this, if you ask enough questions in your book, we're going to get to
Hmm.
this question invertedly because it's just coming up. And also, this is just so hot right now with so many
Yeah.
people. And there's heated debates on it. And I didn't even think it was a problem legitimately till like 3 weeks ago. And I'm not a
Yeah.
content, I'm not a comic creator, I'm not a content creator, but I'm
Hmm.
obviously in this space in the collectible world, and I get commissions done. And it's so tricky because I'm half in mainstream, I'm half in indie, and then I'm
Yeah.
doing indie wrestling, and I'm in voice acting, and I'm in cosplay, and I'm all over the place. So I have very much a 360 view on this, and
That's
it's
cool.
very,
Yeah.
very confusing in that regard. So anyway, I want to back out of controversy, and I do want to talk about your rewards. So obviously
Yeah.
digital, and then there's the standard cover.
Hmm.
And so obviously, what was that like building this standard cover out there? Because it is very much sort of says what this comic is, but it also doesn't.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's one of those things that is really interesting with Kickstarter. I don't want to all the text of what this cover is and the covers are explained in the rewards section of the Kickstarter campaign, like on the right side when you're looking at the rewards. But for the visuals, I wanted it to be as um, you know, not very text heavy. I just wanted to be like say what it is, and then you would look to the right and go and see, okay, what do I want this reward? But I tried to lay it out as easily as possible, where people are
So
like,
even to
okay,
talk about because the cover A for the
mhm,
most part is sort of your standard. It's the type of cover that if you get into a comic shop, you're most likely going to send the cover A to a
right,
comic shop.
right,
And so you want it to state something about the story, but you don't want it to reveal too much, but you want it to be eye catching to some degree versus the
yeah.
variant market, which we're going to get into the variants and talk about that in a second. But what was even the thought process of saying, okay, I need to have this as my cover A?
Yeah, I the thing about cover A is that it's drawn by the interior artist, so I really wanted a cover that people would look at and go, "Oh, like the art inside actually looks like, the cover," because I know a lot of the time you'll pick up a book and the cover doesn't look like anything, that's on the inside. And so that's really important for me just as a fan and as someone who loves reading comics for the cover to, not only represent the issue, but also especially when it comes to a first issue, you need a cover that represents the series, and this cover really sort of, embodies what the series is about. And it does have the monarch butterfly, but Rufus, is wearing a shirt and it has the butterfly wings, and he's eating a bowl of cereal on a rooftop, like where a superhero would be. But he's just sitting there and enjoying his cereal, like a kid would. So, it's playing on all that and it's having fun with it. And this series is a lot of fun. So that's where that cover really came from, because it was just going, this, it makes people smile, it makes people laugh when they think about it. And that's what this series does. But so yeah, I wanted the standard cover to just be something that represented the series and represented sort of the heart of it. And that's what that did.
And then obviously we're going to be talking about some variants, but also you could get a signed copy of it, which is always cool because it's kind of nice because if
Yeah.
it is obviously if you're at a con, you could sign a book. So
Hmm.
obviously that's an option at a con. But then when we get into the variants, you have 4 variants. So I'm going to show all of them first and foremost.
Cool. Cool.
So obviously this is Welby, and that's one of those out there. And then this is Tom Riley's variant cover.
Riley. Yeah. Yeah.
And then this is Nick Pitara, I want to say,
Hmm.
or
Yeah. That's
I'm
right.
really bad at names, so forgive
You're
me.
good, man. Yeah.
And Tony Harris, and obviously, I think there's 4 variants, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's all of them.
I didn't miss one yet. Oh, good. So obviously, all these people are from different eras to some degree. I think a bunch of them are from the '90s, maybe early 2000s. And so obviously, what was this like? Because we're not going back to the Silver Age or Golden Age, but you're getting
Hmm.
some old timers and some veterans. You're not getting the Sunku Manakis and Keith Garveys and
Yeah.
who are the new kids, or Courtney Rose, who apparently have to reach out to get her on because I think it'll be a really cool interview.
Yeah.
So if Harry is watching and he wants to make an introduction, or CB Zane is watching and they want to make an introduction, very helpful. But the idea is that what was this like to bring in some older, artists and veterans who are sort of because I don't know where the modern age started exactly. Modern age, what
Hmm.
was it? Is it '93 or is it like the '90s or?
Yeah, it's really, people kind of set it after, Watchmen or Crisis on Infinite Earths, after the late '80s. So it'd probably be in the early '90s and on, or mid 90s and on. So it fluctuates depending on who you talk to, but I think
So
that's a good
yeah.
assessment. Yeah.
So what was it like though, bringing in these guys and these people?
Yeah.
Because it adds a little bit more of an older feel to it. I think the
Hmm.
style is a little bit different. And that's not saying that they can't do modern style, but
Oh,
obviously
yeah. Yeah.
there's intention there is where we're going with this.
Yeah, completely. This book is about being a comic book fan, and I wanted to be a fan myself, really, and be like, I want to work with some of my favorite artists. Like, I want to see if they would actually help me out with this and if they like the project enough. So it came from a place of me being just a super fan of these artists, and also I wanted different pieces of art that represented the series in different ways, and that's what each cover does. And so um, specifically when it came to Tony Harris, who's an Eisner Award winning artist who worked with James Robinson on Starman in the 90s, and also Ex Machina with Brian K. Vaughan for Vertigo in the early 2000s. He, uh, I love the way he draws women, and I love the way he draws just in general, and how he has a very identifiable style when you look at it and you go, "Oh, that's Tony Harris." So I wanted a very romantic scene because the romance between George Jeffrey and Joanne in the comic is an important part of it, and it's meant to mirror the love that Stan Lee had with Joan, his wife, in the real world. So I wanted someone that really evoked that sense of beauty and two people being intertwined, and that's what that image really does. But with all of them, it was important for me to reach out to people I really loved and to kind of geek out and to have fun with this book as much as possible. And also, that's the beauty of comics, right? Is getting variants and collecting them and getting, all of them. A lot of people love collecting. That's a part of being a comic book fan. So I wanted to kind of, play with that and have people feel like they're getting something really special and something that no one else might have. They can get their version of this book, and the whichever cover that resonates with them the most, they'll really feel.
And obviously, it's very cool. And I talk about this. Obviously, Larry was just on, and we didn't we sort of didn't ask the question directly, but we spoke about the fact that he has all these covers. And
Yeah.
so, what is that like? Obviously, you have significant lists. You have five of them. But it's the idea that you're still giving a lot of choice. And I've said this before in interviews. I don't know how many interviews you've watched me, but I haven't said it in
Hmm.
maybe about 3 or 4 interviews. But I said what's going to determine the future is on demand. So anything that you can watch on your time or read on your
Hmm.
time or print on your time. Big libraries, which is, obviously the more things that you've produced, whether it's comics, YouTube shows, television, seasons of a particular show, Netflix is a good example. Crunchyroll, I'm a big anime fan. They have a lot of
Yeah.
anime that you can watch. It's a big library of content. And then also customization slash choice. And so obviously that choice. So what is that like for you to have this and even book all this stuff? Because it is complicated when you start booking, a cover A and a cover B is complicated. Then you got a cover C, a cover D, and a cover E, And so what was that like for you? Because obviously, though, it's difficult at the same time, costs money to do this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outright. And that's a big
It
thing
is.
people
Yeah.
don't want to talk about because I don't like talking about my finances either on the air. But I know that running a podcast, and I'm the first person to say this, that if I didn't get my sponsorship, January, this show wouldn't have continued.
Mm,
And I was looking for a $40 position just to survive another month.
yeah.
Which would have covered me and given me 5 months to figure out the problem to get across the border. And we're talking about $40. We're not talking
Yeah.
about a $500 or $250 cover price and then coloring it. And
Right.
I don't want to go into how much these people charge per se. So I don't know if that's
Hmm.
private or not, but it's the idea that you need capital and well, they want to be paid now.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I will say I paid all of my artists up front, you know. I mean, they're all paid. They're, nothing is waiting, for I really believe in paying artists and giving them what they're worth because they are, you know, that's what sells the book. I mean, your writing can only do so much. It's really the visuals and what people see firsthand, especially when it comes to a crowdfunding campaign. The visuals are going to be the thing that draws them to the book and makes them want that particular cover. I do love giving people options, and I love people that love these artists because they have worked for Marvel, DC, and Image Comics. People that love them, it helps, them getting the cover they want helps support me, and like everybody wins because they're getting the artist they want and they're supporting the campaign, and they're also supporting that artist because they're like, oh cool, like that artist is doing something for the indie community too, because these people didn't have to say yes to me at all. I mean, they could have been like, oh no, we don't want to do that, that's not something we want to be a part of, but they didn't. And it is all up front, and it is a risk you take as a creator in paying them up front, but it's something that I wanted to do because I believed in this project, and I felt that it was important to show people that, hey, I've invested a lot of money in this, you can trust me because I have done the time and put the money into it, and that I'm not just gonna be like whatever, like, oh, I'm not going to fulfill this campaign. Like, this is really, really important to me as a creator. And so I want everyone to know that, this is all upfront and transparent, and that, these artists have been paid.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm not running a Kickstarter because I just don't have the capital, and
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
personal covenants in my own financial life. Obviously, I'm very much into comic book investing, and I have to take care of that business first and foremost. I have to take care of
Yeah.
other businesses and other interests, and it's just that running a Kickstarter is very, very expensive. I wouldn't be opposed to a partnership with somebody where I would only have to cover half of it and I would only get half
Hmm.
the profits, or have a business partner and we form an LLC where we're both, economically responsible and we fund the business that then funds the Kickstarter upfront and then we recoup our thing. But I don't want to have to go and produce a comic and pull out 3 grand when I would just
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
which I think 3 grand is rather low, but I think it can work. I think I'm not exact. I know very, very little about how much because the printing isn't the issue. Because if you fund
Hmm.
it correctly, your printing will be covered on the back end. It's more of the art that you have to pay, or if you are a writer
Yeah.
or an editor, or maybe even possibly stretch goals to some degree. So that's a big thing for me, and it's
Hmm.
complicated, and I think that that's a big barrier because you need capital to start.
Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, the biggest advice I give anyone, if they want to, do a Kickstarter or do their own comics, is save your money. Just save it and keep saving it up. Whether it takes a year or two, whatever you have to do, just put a little aside for that project you want to do, and eventually it will add up to where you can start paying an artist. You could start working on that stuff. And that's something I did with my first book, Seasons, and that I continue to do. When I started working and getting money, I started saving up. And, it took a while, and it's something you have to keep doing. You have to keep budgeting yourself. But progress does get made. It's okay if it's slow, it's still progress. You're still doing it. So,
There's other methods in which that equity
yeah.
other positions do, and I think equity is frowned upon in Kickstarter.
Hmm.
I think granting equity, but it's tricky because the whole problem with granting equity is that an artist, and you have to find the right artist, and it becomes a business partnership of
Yeah.
co-ownership of, and then you're funding a business and you're in a business venture, and it can work very nicely. The people that live
Hmm.
in comics, they are equity partners. If one of them's an artist, one of them's a writer, and they formed a company and they just did Yole on Kickstarter, but that's an equity play versus the idea that I think either shoot, I can't think of their names right now, but one of them is the writer, one of them is the artist, and that's equity. But I don't know how many artists are going to want to work on equity.
Yeah.
But look, equity. If you have a project and you think the project's worth X amount of money, that's the thing, is that you find somebody, some image creators. Saga's a great example. Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan have worked on equity. They haven't worked on page rates. Saga
Hmm.
is a very, very, very lucrative position and is worth a lot more than what it costs Fiona Staples or Brian K. Vaughan to write it,
Hmm.
because it's equity. But equity could also fail badly, and I understand
Yeah.
people have to eat. And this is why I go create indie. Well, if you got to eat, and people say, "Oh, all these people are leaving DC with Substack," part of the thing is that they can, because they have enough money that they've made that they don't have to worry about their bills. But what about the people who
Yeah.
are just starting out? And that's what DC can do. Where if you're just starting out, it's not that you might be able to write a better book than a lot of these people on Substack, but you have to pay your rent, or you have to put your kid through school or college.
Yeah.
If DC is going to write you a check of $7,000 every month, well, you know what it is. That $7,000 is worth a hell of a lot more than your indie comic that'll pay you in 8 months. It'll pay
Yeah.
you 40 grand. It'll beat that 7,000 position hands down. It'll pay you more and more, like 100,000. But what are you doing in your 8 months that you're waiting for it?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So it's super tricky, and I think it's complicated. But obviously that's a big tangent right there. So obviously there's some other stuff too. There's obviously a retail bundle, so five
Mhm.
copies, $30 if you're a store. Um, Obviously there's some art print stuff. I think I have a better
Yeah.
picture of the art print right there. So there's
Yeah.
that. Um, Obviously, I think there's this where it's an original sketch by
Yeah,
Jay.
that's by Jay Mazar, the artist of the book, and he'll draw a man-child inspired character of your choice. So if you want the Monarch Crier, Professor Pilgrim, or Rufus, he'll draw the character you want.
And so that's cool, and it's not that bad. There's obviously this, all the covers. So really like a lot of this art, and you're a '90s baby. There you go. Obviously the entire Foxhole Comics bundle, which is seasons. I think, what is it? Issue volume 1 and volume 2.
Yeah, seasons volumes 1 and 2, and Lifeline, which is a standalone graphic novel, and then you get Man-Child issue 1. So you get all the books that I've made for $85. So it's over 300 pages. Seasons volumes 1 and 2 are both over 100 pages each, and Lifeline is 96 pages. So you're getting a lot of comics for that price. So if someone wants to catch up, they can read all my work.
And then obviously there's this drawn into the man-child story. And so this is my question, because is it for issue 1 or is it for issue 2? Because different Kickstarters run that differently, where sometimes they
Right.
forward it in issue 2 or they do it in issue 1.
Yeah, it is in issue 1. Yeah, so you'll be getting it with this issue.
And so that's something that's out there. And then there's this as well, where, and I don't know if this is still available, but
Hmm.
obviously, you can get an original page from man-child number 1, and I don't know how many are open for this and how that works exactly.
Yeah, so there were 5 slots, and I think there's 2 or 3 left. A few people have gotten them, but it's still available. So yeah, we will send you an original page from the first issue of Man-Child. So, if you get this, you'll have original artwork from the book, and you'll also get all of the previous rewards that are listed there.
And so obviously there's a lot of stuff out there. And then,
Mhm.
how far are you away from being funded, just so people know?
Yeah, we're actually so yeah, we have about 42 hours left, and we are 93% funded. I think we need to get like just under $300 to fund right now. So I think it's at like 4,200, and we need 4,500. So we're getting there. It's on its way for sure.
And so the reason why I bring that up is that obviously there's a variety of rewards here that you could pick up from where just picking up, you know, $250 tiers will get you completely funded, or getting a bunch of other things such as a bunch of $20 variants. Doing the math here, what is that?
Yeah, you'd have to get you know, uh, about 10 to 15, if you wanted to get, if multiple, 10, 15 to 20 people, wanted to get a variant cover, that's how much, yeah, it would take
So
to
15
get.
people, right? Would get you funded.
Yeah, yeah.
So you really need 15 people.
Yeah, I do. I really do. And I hope we can get them. Only have under 2 days now. So, and I'm really trying to hit 150 backers. We're at 143. And once we hit 150, everyone's going to get a free art print by Daniel Buck, who's a great indie artist. So that'll be free for everyone's order for a physical book.
And then obviously, I know you mentioned this before on Travis's show, but obviously, I think you offer free shipping in the U.S.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So
And
what
so
you see
that's something
there,
that is
yeah.
important too, because obviously I just backed, and I know I mentioned Larry a lot in this entire thing. I just like saying his name all the time now, and people might not like this interview because of it, but that's fine. But he's in Canada, for those who don't know, and so it was like $15 to ship to the U.S. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, the dollar's a lot stronger right now in the U.S. than in Canada, meaning my dollar is a US dollar is 86 what a Canadian dollar is. So for every 86 cents US, it's a dollar in Canada. So
Man.
there's about a 14 cents, in my favor. So
hmm
a $35 Canadian pledge is $28 in the US, which is helpful. But it was
hmm
$15 Canadian to ship here, which is like $7. So it's not horrendous to
hmm
that degree. But it's also the idea that when you're offering free shipping, that takes out $5 to $7 off the ticker that I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about when I back. And I bring that up because obviously I charge a lot of money on shipping on eBay.
hmm
I charge $10 to $11 on top of whatever I'm charging on eBay, because that's how much it costs me to ship something out in
hmm
a Gemini. And that's not factoring the bubble tape or the Gemini, it's legitimately factoring the postage. On
Yeah.
average, it costs me anywhere from $9 to about $12. And sometimes I make money on shipping like $1, and sometimes I lose money. But
hmm
also, it costs me $10 because I'm insuring it. Because when I'm shipping
Yeah.
out a $150 book, I insure it for $200.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um, because the insurance is legitimately $3 extra, which makes sense. So obviously, I want to bring that up because I think it's important that people have to say, "Oh man, I'm going to be dropping $20 on this plus $7." No, it's $20, and then if you don't add anything else, you're done.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And that's how I like it. I like backing, if I know it's an international book, I'm ready to pay the shipping, but in the US, it really helps me to know that what I'm paying is what I'm paying, instead of, paying $20, and then yeah, you get to the end of the purchase and it's like, oh, it's actually 28 or 30, and you're like, wait a second, like
Somebody just
that's
put
not
that
what
up.
I thought.
Somebody just put that up on Facebook.
Mm.
Caleb from Super Cats just put that up,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, Caleb. Yeah.
he just put that up. I'm singling out a lot of people here, and it wasn't a negative post, but it was the idea that he said, "Yo," I forgot exactly what he said, but he said something to the effect that if you're trying to charge me extra shipping at checkout, you know, that's not good. And when I said it, I think he said like that's the quickest way how to lose me. I said absolutely. I mean, I won't back your project. He said I won't back your project. And I said that's the quickest way to lose me. If
Yeah.
by charging me shipping, yeah, I understand it's international. I understand if a book is expensive. I understand some things, but I would rather you just factor it in, and I know exactly what I'm getting, and that I check out, and I don't have to worry about it again.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Because it can be very, very, very frustrating, that entire process. So
hmm
obviously, that's something that I want to highlight here because I think it's super important that people know that they're
Yeah.
getting free shipping, so that you know you got $20, you're done at $20.
Right. Right.
So,
That's
so
right. And and that's why the goal, is 4,500. I factor in the shipping with that goal. It's so, I could have made the goal smaller and we've already would have hit it, because I would have had a smaller goal and would have charged people for shipping. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to get that customer that backs my book and then doesn't follow through because they're paying, $15 to $20 for the standard cover, for a 22-page standard covered book. If it was a variant, they'd have to pay like around 30 or so. And I didn't want to charge $30 for them to get my book. So that was really important to me to
it,
maintain
it
that.
also, it also, and I'm going to say this, I buy a lot of Zenesco books and they sell their 350 print runs for $20 and their 250 print runs for $25. I
Yeah.
don't want to spend more than $25 on a variant that is equivalent to a 250 print run. And that's another thing
Yeah.
that lose me is that I understand Indie can't compete with Marvel and DC, but you got to be close enough to them. You got to be close
Yeah,
enough to them. Where I get that
totally.
your book might have to be $10 versus a Marvel
Hmm.
book that's $4. I completely get that, and I'm willing to surrender at that point. But your variant on a 350 per run can't be more than $20. I just won't back
Yeah,
it. I'm priced out at that point because it's not up to standard par, and that's a
right.
problem for me at the very least. And it's a very interesting discussion. I think that has to happen. Now I understand if it's a 50 issue variant and you're charging me 50 or 60 or $100, I get that because it's super
Hmm.
limited. But that's a different discussion also.
Yeah, yeah,
So
for
so
sure.
yeah, but obviously there's a lot to talk about, and you and me both are going to get canceled at this point. And your career is over, and mine is over. Um,
Right. This is where it all ends.
I mean, I'm season 2 has got 4 months left, so clearly. Um, and it's only Monday, guys. It's only Monday.
Right.
But anyway, I do want to back out of this, and I am super curious because obviously you're in the U.S. and I think you're in Central Time, Midwest, maybe or
Yeah.
more.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
that's right.
you're an hour behind me, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Cool. So you're talking to me in the future. I'm talking to you in the past. Awesome. Um, it's my favorite joke to use. But having said that, and getting back to seriousness, the reason why I asked this is I have friends who are wrestlers and they wrestle in the Midwest, and COVID hit them differently than it hit me in Washington, D.C. when I used to live in D.C. And obviously, I'm back in the East Coast in Connecticut, and it's
Hmm.
affected New York differently. And it took, them to have COVID started popping up in like July of 2020 versus in New York and Connecticut it was popping up in April. So I am super curious where you think COVID's going because the country and the US in particular is a very vast place and different parts of the US are dealing with it, and obviously every state is going to deal with COVID. And how do you think cons are going to react, because Texas is not going to view it the same way New York is, the same way Kansas is going to view it the same way Florida is going to view it, and the same way California is going to view it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's up to each state's discretion of how they want to deal with it. I mean, population numbers really do matter when it comes to something like this. So if you are in a very populated area, I think the restrictions should probably be a little stronger because it's just there's more people that could, you know, infect or spread, whatever. And so, it's something that when it comes to cons, I really understand, and I'm kind of preparing myself for, either another shutdown or not being able to still not go to cons for a while because things are still a little hairy out there, and that makes sense. And I think that people need to be healthy and safe, rather than
So
um, you know.
this is my question because obviously I don't know when you checked out on Travis's show, and the reason I bring this up is they asked me about networking and things like that, and I said I don't
Mhm.
know if I'm ever going to go to a con ever again.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
And,
Yeah.
and the reason why I bring it up is that everything I want now is online. This entire
Yeah.
show is online. I've been digitalized, and I was sort of digitalization way before it became a necessity. And I had a real advantage when COVID hit because I was doing interviewing 6 years prior to this, and I was actively getting at about 30 a year. And I
Mhm.
stepped up tremendously. And so I don't know, like for me, I find the great digitalization pivot to be wonderful. I find that there's so much more opportunity, and that I don't know what the con has to offer because I
Mhm.
legitimately can go hop on a Zoom call and set up a link and throw it into a group and then figure out if I already have all my friends and everybody on Kickstarter, and I don't even have a Kickstarter, but if I have 100 backers, I'd be like, guys, we're going to talk about this book. Who wants to join in and know all the secrets about issue 2 that's coming out? I'm hopping on a Zoom call and we're going to launch the Kickstarter on Zoom. And since all your Kickstarter backers and they really love your book, I mean, for me, how do you think it's all going to change? Because the internet allows me to be more competitive and reach so many more people on a global scale, more than I can ever do at a con with very, very little money.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, what I love about going to cons is meeting people, and is meeting people face to face if they have my book, and we can talk about it. It's something that I love, being able to connect with so many people online, and do interviews like this and talk to people, who live in Canada like Larry, or other parts of the world, and that you can have these connections with people. But there is, like, one of my best friends, I met him online, and then when we actually met in person, it was it was crazy. It felt like, you're like, "Whoa, like, you're actually real," You're not just someone that I've talked to over the internet, or on a screen or something. And there's something about, that I find really satisfying, and, like, meeting creators that I like, and meeting other indie creators that I like. It would be really cool to meet them in person. I do think that it's a good time to adapt, and a good time that, we can have online conventions and do things like that. But for me, I really like the con experience, and I like meeting other people and talking with them. So it's kind of, I think, kind of depends on, you know, who you are, if you like talking to other people in person or not. And it can really depend on the show too, if you like going to that specific show. I don't go to many cons. I like them when I'm there, but it's not something that I actively do. And partially because I feel like I should have more books, and then I'll go to conventions and have more to show for people. But
So for me, what it is that I'm obviously a fan panelist. I love lecturing, and I love
yeah,
lecturing about things that are fun and useful, and that from comic book investing to breaking down the golden age of anime with Osamu Tezuka and going through that. And I love this stuff. But what I've come to the conclusion is that I am beyond more influential sitting at a kitchen table interviewing creators or doing a YouTube video or recording something or doing a Facebook Live talking about a particular comic book thing. I just ordered some Pokemon cards. I'm going to be way more useful and influential unpacking 6 Pokemon cards, explaining why a special delivery Biboff is a $300 Pokemon card than I can ever be at a convention. And
yeah,
so to me, I've just come to the conclusion that I love meeting people. I've had, outside my panel, I've had like 10 people and me sit around or outside and then, talking about comic book investing, just going on a round circle. And it was great. I've had a Gundam conversation that lasted an hour and a half, and it was phenomenal with like 6 people all talking about this. And it was like, oh, let's talk about this. And it was like 2 girls and 2 guys and me. And we were all having a nice conversation talking about everything beyond that wasn't in my panel, and
yeah,
I had a blast, and it was phenomenal. But my point is that I still feel like I can do all this online, and so I'm super curious
right.
what you think cons are going to change because I don't think that we can ever go back to what we had before because what we had
Mm.
before wasn't safe.
Hmm.
and COVID exposed that. And I also think that there's just massive amount of competition. I think the competition level has like tripled, if not quadrupled. Not to mention that you know I could do and it's also the idea that if you do something online like with celebrities, if you want a celebrity autograph and watch them sign it, and they could do a virtual pound from their house, you buy a ticket, and it's like I don't know where you think all this is going, and where the change is going to be, because I'm super curious on that, because you've been to
Yeah.
content creator. I haven't. I've been as a panelist, and I know where the
Hmm.
change needs to happen with that, but I don't know what needs to occur with creators.
Right. Right. For me, it's like there are some people that aren't in, the digital circles that I found when I go to conventions. There are some people that aren't maybe social media savvy or don't have social media. It's weird to think that there are people like that out there, but there are. There are a lot of people that don't necessarily use it that much. And I've noticed that when I've gone to conventions, um, and I have a table there. They have never heard of me. They've never heard of me. They've never seen me online or anything. And it's the first time that they've seen my book, and it's because I'm physically there with my product that they take an interest, and they find it satisfying to meet the creator. There's so many people that will walk up to my booth and they're like, "Whoa, like you made this?" Like it's like they're, to stand in the presence of the creator of the book that they're holding in their hands is it's a unique experience, and it's a unique interaction that you have with the customer, that it kind of goes into the whole idea of, our retail store is going to go away, because there are a lot of people that still love to go shopping. They love to go out. They love to
I like
interact with.
shopping. I went to a comic shop, and I legitimately was in there and spent an hour and a half looking for, like, I think I got like 17 books for $1. And
Yeah.
I pulled
Yeah.
it, and I could tell you it was better than therapy. It wasn't better than that, I
Right.
can tell you that.
Right.
It was better than therapy. It was better than a rage room. I have never
Yeah.
been to a rage room, but I think the point's being made here, where it was like it was better than going to the bar. Like, it
Yeah.
was so
Yeah.
peaceful and it was so tranquil, and I'm like, and I didn't even know what I got. I didn't get anything to read. I got things to take pictures of to put on my Instagram. But
Hmm.
legitly, I spent $36 because I bought a few variants that were like $4 or $5, and then I bought an $8 book that's really cool of
Yeah.
Batgirl. And my point is that for $36, I gave myself like in 2 hours on Free Comic Book Day of
Hmm.
entertainment. I never like, and I'm going back, I think, next Saturday. So I had a blast. It was quiet. It was peaceful, and if I can, $36 buys me 2 hours of happiness. So
Yeah. Yeah,
super
and
interesting.
that's a great example. That's something that I don't think.
I
um
miss that. I miss that at cons.
yeah.
Because at cons, it's so chaotic and so combustion, and it's so
Hmm.
moving. Like in this comic shop, there's like maybe 3 or 4 people, and somebody wanted to get by me or go into my box. They waited 2 minutes till I was done.
Yeah.
Or they said, "Hey, I just saw you move this thing out. I just want that book. Can I take it?" I'm like, "Yeah, go right ahead." And that was that. But there's like, when I'm pulling books, if somebody sees I'm in a box, they just go to the next box over, and then I'm like, "Hey, you want to switch?" Like, "Yeah, sure." And it was
Right. Right.
wonderful. At conventions, I feel like it's too crowded for that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a lot harder to look for comics and conventions, and it's there's so much to look at. It's a really overwhelming, for sure. And I've definitely had those experiences, where it's like I don't even know what to get because there's so much here.
It's
um,
not even so much that, it's also price, because all these books were $1. So I'm
yeah,
finding books that
right,
were more
right.
than $1, but they're not worth like $3. Maybe worth like
Hmm.
$2, and I'm having a great time because they just look awesome to put up on Instagram. The I could have picked up like half of Scott Snyder's first run on Batman for a
Yeah,
dollar a piece, and those books aren't worth much. And maybe they're a little beat up, but they're not overly beat up, and it would be great to put it up. And I can't wait to go back, but that you can't do that at con, because all those books that were $1 in this store would be like $3 at a con.
yeah, right.
So,
Right.
but I digress right there. Again, another tangent. That's what this show is. That's what today is all about. It's called Tangent Monday. We start on a topic, and then we purposely go off a tangent, and then we get
Then we get
back into a tangent. It's
right.
a new show. It's officially announced.
Yeah.
With my sponsorship money, that's what we're doing here. Um, so bad. It's so bad. Obviously, we've been speaking for a while now, and I
Yeah.
do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. So obviously, the Kickstarter link is up above. But where can people back the Kickstarter?
Mhm.
You have limited time to back the Kickstarter, so it is urgent. As well
Yeah.
as follow you on social media, Facebook pages, Instagram pages,
Yeah.
Twitter, website. I don't know what other social media platforms you use, but obviously, where can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me on Facebook and Nandor Fox Schaefer. This is my name there. Also on Twitter and Instagram, it's at Nandor Fox. So you can find me, just type in my name on both of those. Yeah, please back Manchild issue 1 on Kickstarter. We have less than 2 days. We have like 42 hours to go, and we're around $300 shy of hitting the goal. So it's really, really urgent. And you can get all of my books. We talked about the Foxhole Comics bundle, so you can get Seasons Volumes 1 and 2, Lifeline, and Manchild issue 1, all for $85. So if you want to really help out the campaign and pick up everything that I've done, that's a great reward. And also check me out on YouTube, Foxhole Comics. That is my imprint. That's my brand. And that's what you can type in on YouTube, Foxhole Comics. And I do streams with my artists. I talk about writing comics, and it's a really engaging platform that I use to try to talk about what I'm working on and updating people on stuff. So, yeah, that's really the main gist of it. And, I just want people to uh, see my work and hopefully enjoy it and let me know, and be a part of the conversation about you know being a creator and being a fan, and having that interaction. So I'm always open to talk, and always open to answer any questions about what I'm working on and things that are happening.
And then obviously, I've been saying this over and over and over again. I'm going to keep saying it, is you have to support indie. And what
Yeah.
that means is that you have to back Kickstarters.
Hmm.
These people cannot fund their project without your backing. And
Yeah.
so every dollar makes a project cross that line closer. And all the money really does go back into that project, or it goes into the next issue, or it goes into another project they're working on for the
Hmm.
most part. And it helps to cover the printing costs. And so it is super, super important to understand that you have to back indie comics. And the way you do that, first and foremost, as I just stated, is with your money. But I get it, money's tight. I'm there. Money's tight in my life right now. I have to fulfill certain covenants that are going on. We're going into the holiday season, guys. I know it's end of August, beginning of September, but holiday season is starting. And
Yeah.
with everything being up in the air, you have to really start thinking a few months ahead, and money is tight. And if you're in a circumstance where money's tight, one of the things that you should be doing if you can't back is sharing it around. Because
Yeah.
if you
Please
tweet about
do.
it, share it on Facebook, you don't know who's watching. And I tell this story all the time, where what happens is that this happened with somebody where they shared it out, and they saw it on my wall, and then there was about 3 or 4 people who backed the project
Mm,
because they saw it and they didn't even know it existed, and Facebook's algorithms are messed up. And so
yeah.
therefore it is super, super important to understand that sharing something out, somebody might see it and be like, oh, this looks cool, let me check it out. And it could go a long, long way. So obviously that is something that you should be doing. And even about me, guys, obviously I have a sponsorship and that helps, but I also have Buy Me a Coffee. This is very much a fan supported show. So you could buy me a coffee, which is very similar to Patreon. That all the money goes right back into this show. You could actually advertise on my show, which is super cool. Little banner down beneath. So if you got a project or you want to advertise your Facebook group, that's out there. Or even going further, I have an email list. And so you can join my email list, and you never know what's going to be in my email that's sent out once a week. I don't spam you, but obviously you can check that out too. So Obviously, those three things matter. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
All right. Yeah, I want everyone to please go and back Manchild if you want on Kickstarter. We have 42 hours left, and this is the most exciting thing that I've worked on, the most challenging thing that I've worked on as a writer. And if you love Silver Age comic book storytelling and you love stories that look at what it means to be a fan, and if you're a comic book fan at all, this book is going to put a smile on your face and it's going to make you think about the heroes that you've loved, the creators that you love, and why you are a superhero fan. So if you love that and if that resonates with you, you're going to really love Manchild, and you're going to read it and you're going to feel like a kid again.
And I don't think I could have said that any better myself. So we're going to quit while we are ahead, and that is a wrap.